Hello, Toffees. Welcome back to another episode of the Blue Frontier, coming to you following Everton 1, West Ham 1. Everton coming from behind to pick up a point at Goodison Park, with Jake O'Brien getting a late equalizer for the second time in 3 games. Toffees now unbeaten in 9 straight. That's the longest unbeaten run in the league since 2017 under Ronald Koeman, and also gaining their league-leading 13th draw of the season. The Kings of the Draw. We are going to recap the match as we always do on this show. Before we do that, I wanted to just take a moment to plug Toffee Fest. Second annual Toffee Fest taking place in San Diego this year from April 11th to the 13th, so just under a month away now. We talked to Tony this week, that is the Tony Sampson, and there's been very solid interest in RSVP so far, good registration, and they have a really great weekend planned. Shan and I are going to be there, and we're really excited for what's to come.
Yeah, James, and like you said, just super excited. Attended the event last year in Chicago and got to give a lot of credit to Tony and the North American Toffees for doing such a great job, but just kind of some of the potential events on the itinerary, I think it's pretty bang on or nailed on, as Tony would say, that there's going to be a fun welcome party Friday at the San Diego Toffees bar, as well as the same bar to watch Nottingham Forest at 7 a.m. So for you East Coasters and Central Timers that are coming, you'll kind of get a taste of that. Then just kind of some of the events that are, in contention. There's a barbecue on the beach. Last year they did the Fire and Cubs games, and so they're going to plan to drum up interest for the Padres and the San Diego Wave games. So just overall, I think it's going to be a great weekend. Of course, right now, just with the state the club's in, of course, this could be kind of that building block towards the summer events, of course, which just came out this week. So ton of excitement right now. And, James and I are so excited to go, as well as do some content, right, in terms of post-match, at the pub. So really excited about that. But in transition, I need to hand it off to Ryan. It's great to have him back on the pod for the summary quote of the day, as it's his turn.
San Diego sounds nice in April, too. I'm not going to lie to you guys. That's telling you. Family commitments, folks. What can I say? Priorities. My summary quote was from Mark/Southeast Michigan Toffee. The match was simultaneously fun and frustrating. A point feels deserved on balance. Still had a chance to steal all 3 at the end. A brutal April will end the streak, but glad we've already banked enough points to be safe. And I think that's true. It was kind of good to feel like you felt like you maybe could have won today, like you're almost the better team, which I hadn't felt that way in a while. Let's not lose sight of the goal here. And that's how I want to remind our listeners of that. And I'm going to quote Richard Lloyd here at Rich Lloyd 1984. The aim was to avoid relegation, a task Moyes has completed easily. The squad's pretty poor and borderline dreadful when we are missing key players. And I think that's true. I think that was very evident today. We'll get into the analysis a little bit. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I did spend a little time at the pub today with a couple of the Northern Virginia folks. And the rugby was on, so it made parking a little bit of a problem. And I must say, I ran into this quote, and I know it's totally off topic, but I'm going to bring it up anyway, from Michael Cox, who did Zonal Marking and The Mixer. Great books, right? Just goes to show you that not all writers are the most lovely humans at times. So his comment was, sorry, but you're underestimating how brain-dead rugby is as a sport. It's impossible to be a rugby man and also have a decent understanding of football. So to me, it was very confusing because I kept looking at the rugby saying, oh yeah, I played rugby in college. I know a little bit about rugby. But then I realized that you can't be a rugby man and also have a decent understanding of football. So I had to suspend my understanding of rugby during the match at the pub to focus on the football, because apparently it's completely impossible to do both. It's like when people say you can't possibly understand football and understand data. Like your brain is not possible for your brain to absorb that sort of diversity in thought and understanding. I just wanted to share that with you guys. So we're all simple humans. We're too dumb to be able to understand things like this, just as a quick reminder. So thank you, Michael Cox. I appreciate your book, Zonal Marking and The Mixer, but that's absolutely embarrassing.
Lack of duality of man there.
Right.
Can't have both.
Exactly. The glory, the affirmation of man, to quote one of my favorite bands. Anyway, yes, you got to work your way forward with cynicism sometimes, gentlemen. Anyway, score prediction, Sean.
Yeah, Ryan, I don't know if I can do score predictions and, the pod at the same time, but I'm going to do my best. So we're going to...
boom. Sorry.
Yeah, I think Joey Barton hacked his account because that seems like a tweet in his realm. But moving forward, the score predictions, quite a few correct today, so give a lot of credit. To Clayson, Sunnut, Mark M, Toyota driver, Mike, of course, Tony Sampson, EFC Jonesy, Harper Short Canvas, that's 2 in a row for him, Cryptus, and Mike Kennedy. So great job, guys. Tough one to predict, but 1-1 or 1-0 or 2-1 has kind of been the common theme. So, and draws are aplenty these days. But going into the actual match, to you, James, for the Everton lineup.
Yeah, at long last, we actually have something different to talk about in regard to the Everton lineup, and that is some slight tweaks made by David Moyes, namely in the form of Jesper Lindstrom dropping to the bench and Jack Harrison moving over to the right-hand side in order to make room for Charlie Alcaraz to get his first start at Goodison Park. Broja also back on the bench, which was great to see. We knew that he had resumed training and looked likely to potentially feature, and of course he did today. And most importantly, guys, I think this cannot be emphasized enough. Our streak of 2 keepers on the bench is at long last finally over. Long may it be dead and buried, because that was just embarrassing for the longest time, and it goes back, a number of seasons, and then sort of reemerged as of late. But just very thankful to see the squad finally getting back to fitness, and for Moyes to actually have some options to look to later on in matches.
Yeah, and James, it's nice to know that João Virginia is the clear number 2, because there was some doubt to know that if it was him or Begovic.
Poor Begovic.
But in all seriousness, going into West Ham, I kind of got excited when I saw this lineup personally, because, Graham Potter, I think he's actually done a pretty decent job of shoring up their defensive shape. They kind of were leaking goals at the end of the Lopetegui era. But in regards to just kind of some of the injuries they've had and just personnel, 2 guys that I think are big misses for them are Nicholas Fulkrug, who was in potential to come back for this game, but Crescencio Somerville, I think, is a big miss for them. And it's an interesting story with him, because right now there's a lot of rumors circling that he should have surgery, but he doesn't want to. So there's kind of this like sports science discussion between West Ham fans right now on what the player should do. But I digress. Going into the rest of their lineup, this might be the slowest midfield of all time. You go into looking at those 3. Thomas Souček, of course, a guy that I think is not very mobile, but he is a man of moments, as we'll get to later. But then you look at James Ward-Prowse, of course, on loan at Forest most of the year and has come back. And of course, just kind of with their lack of options there, quality options, I would say. But of course, Lucas Paquetá, this might be his last game in the Premier League, depending on how that whole ban goes. But yeah, that's a skillful midfield in regards to, James Ward-Prowse with set pieces, of course, Paquetá with just his overall flair and ability to kind of progress the ball. And then, of course, Thomas Souček, man of moments. But yeah, just so slow.
Yeah, that's the thing. You look at some of these individuals, they're not terrible players. Some of them are bigger names that are maybe overrated,
sure.
I guess. But as individuals, they're not that bad. I mean, a couple of these guys, like Mavropanos has a mistake. He should be so good, by the way. He's just not. But yeah, those 3, they don't work together. And then you look at Ward-Prowse was, 35 million euros, and he was like a month or 2 away from turning 29. It's just on top of each other. And then you already had a slow midfield and just kept adding to it. It just, with Edson Alvarez and Guido
Rodriguez, yeah.
Right, good players.
Yeah,
I mean, honestly, if you had one of those guys on your team, they're useful. It's just kind of a lesson in squad construction, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to you, Ryan. They actually have, if you just looked at like the names, pretty good players, but the way this squad is constructed, I mean, even the center backs, right? You look at Jean-Claire Todibo, I think is, he's going to get healthy and he's going to get better. Mavropanos to me is just a mistake waiting to happen, to your point. I think West Ham fans haven't had enough of him. Max Gilman's been pretty good for them this season. I think he's kind of been, of course they paid
too.
Paid big money for him, but at the end of the day, it's like, he's kind of one of the guys that is performing for them. 2 wingbacks are decent, Emerson and Aaron Wan-Bissaka. I think Aaron Wan-Bissaka, good value for them. West Ham don't have many good buys, but he was one of them. And then, of course, you get to the front two. You can't say enough about these 2 guys, Jared Bowen and Mohamed Kudus. And I think they kind of, unfortunately, you might not see the overall production from them, but I don't think that's a product of them. It's just when you have that midfield and when you kind of put those 2 guys on an island trying to improve defensive shape. And then, of course, Alfonso Areola. And Ryan, I'll kind of hand it to you in regards to some of the comparisons this guy has gotten at the pub. But yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Soren was talking about like the last name and combined with kind of the general look. I think the more PC way to say it, or the more appropriate for the pod, was he looked like he could have stepped right off the set of Narcos. Yeah, I think, Sean, just in general, you look at this and you can say some of these things in isolation weren't good, weren't bad buys. But even Wan-Bissaka, I mean, he's so limited with the ball, and you saw that today. He's a good defender, but I don't know. There's just some construction-wise it's very odd. And then you'll have like a couple buys in here that did make sense, that had been hurt. And so there's a lot of weird things going on. We'll talk about how well they're using Evan Ferguson. It's a good thing they got that deal in. He's made a big difference for them. It's very much totally being sarcastic. It's a strikerless lineup too, and I also don't think they're getting the most out of Bowen by having him where he is. And I kind of feel like him and Kudus should be occupying the same spaces on the field as well. But there are some good players on there too. And I think some of the matchups are interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, a couple that we keyed in on, first and foremost, our wingers, Charlie and Jack, on the day versus their wing backs. In particular, Wan-Bissaka's got a reputation as a very good one-on-one defender. So how would Alcaraz do against someone like that versus Harrison going against Emerson? We know Jack, not necessarily the best at taking guys one-on-one, but Emerson also, again, these guys, they don't have a lot of pace in their team, so could we exploit that? And then Jared Bowen is such a talisman for West Ham. How would we do, particularly Branthwaite and Tarkowski, and keeping him limited and getting on the ball and facing up and being able to take guys on one-on-one?
Well, and James, I mean, it's a little unpredictable when you don't play with a traditional striker, right? And they have a bit this year, so I guess there's some predictability of it, but you've had multiple coaches, so maybe not the easiest preparation job for Moyes. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I would also say, too, like, he knows the squad as well as anybody, right? But I don't think this is a lineup that he would traditionally put out. So I think for him, and like I said, I mean, they're kind of, shifting mentalities in regards to tactics between Lopetegui and Potter. And I think with how often their personnel has been injured, they haven't really kind of figured out that specific lineup. And kind of like us, right? They're not in a relegation battle. They're not fighting for Europe. So I think right now they're just kind of playing with house money to try to figure out how they can finish the rest of the season.
And it's interesting, what do you do with this midfield in many ways? You could see him pushing up higher, maybe with Souček behind them, and the added center back maybe helps them be very stout, because that's the other big matchup, who controls the midfield. And I think we've noticed that Garner and Ghana have been a little lopsided, I think, at times. I don't really know if anyone controlled the midfield all that well today, just looking at it. By the way, I also made an observation at the bar I just felt like mentioning. Charlie looks like if Morrissey was born in South America and just kind of came up. Like, as Morrissey started to gain weight, his head, I felt like, got a much bigger than the rest of his body, and it had a similar haircut. Am I crazy about saying that? I don't know.
I can see it, Ryan. You know what? I can see it a little bit. Yeah.
A little bit. Either way, I think it's also, today was a bit of a commentary, too, on that Charlie kind of Decore decision. How would that play out? Because it's like Moyes hedged his bets by playing Charlie and playing Decore. So I think it was curious how that would work out. And then moving into the match, I mean, I almost felt like the referee was more of a feature kind of early. Just so inconsistent with the fouls. I felt like everything we did was a foul. Nothing they did was. I don't know, moving into the timeline, whether I really felt much of a rhythm in this match at all.
No, it was just kind of consistent pressing on our end, right, to kind of just really make them uncomfortable. I thought overall we did a pretty decent job at that. But of course, you expect, the more pressing you do and the more results you're not getting, sooner or later, they're going to kind of either, get past you and put something in. So, it gets to essentially the 12th minute to kind of move things forward. And they get a corner kick and really great save by Jordan Pickford. It was Bowen that got the initial header, but then Jared just kind of unfortunately was in the way. And then just, excellent header or excellent save, of course, by Pickford there, because that was a big moment in the match. Because if you go down 1-0 that early, I think it sets the tone for them to kind of really just control things.
Set pieces was a big story of the day, really. There wasn't a whole lot happening from open play, but I think tactically there were some decisions that kind of neutralized that. Neither team was taking that many any risks. I felt like Kudus and Bowen were somewhat isolated. I mean, Paqueta would sneak up forward. They attacked a little bit through their wingbacks, but they weren't throwing numbers up, and really neither were we. I think Shan and James, Shan, you guys made an observation of how we were trying to match up with their midfield and kind of how it took Garner away from the match a little bit. I don't know if this really worked in our favor, but Paqueta didn't do a whole lot as a result.
Yeah, Garner was a kind of aggressively most of the time out of possession, just tracking Lucas Paqueta, following him absolutely everywhere. And then out in possession, Garner was kind of shifting all over the place. So it seemed like positionally, we know that one of the critiques of Garner is not necessarily the most disciplined. So in some ways, giving him a clear man-marking assignment, I think mitigates that a little bit. But then in possession, he's kind of floating all over the place, just trying to get involved.
And to a certain extent, it did. I mean, Paqueta wasn't overly impactful other than his diving around like he was hurt half the time.
Screeching.
Oh, I mean, just kind of embarrassing at times. I mean, he had 63 touches, which less than Ward-Prowse. I mean, granted, he was, didn't go as long. But I mean, most of their guys, like, it was a lot of playing out to the left, a lot of control with Emerson with the ball, and a lot of playing in the back with Todibo. And then Wisaka was pushed up a lot. Wan-Bissaka had 88 touches and led the entire match. So, I mean, that's what a lot of it was. It was kind of rotating out, trying to get their wingbacks up. And Garner really helped us kind of take out some of their attack down the middle. But fundamentally, there's a huge hole there. I mean, no one's going to take the ball and dash up the pitch with it. The only issue is on set pieces, you do have a very good delivery guy in Ward-Prowse, and they have some height, especially playing with three in the back, and you've got Souček on there too. So it's something we had to be aware of. We grew into the game a little bit. I mean, you started to see some things happen. I wouldn't say any of these were massive chances, though, in the middle of the first half.
No, I mean, it felt like the pressure was definitely limiting what West Ham were able to do. I mean, neither team seemed all that interested in playing through the middle at all, sending a lot of stuff out wide, and Everton in particular getting a lot of crosses in. And then in like the 21st to the 23rd, had a decent period of pressure, a couple corners mixed in there, throwing it in the mixer, but no major chances came of it, just possession and touches in the box.
Yeah, and we'll look at the numbers at the end of the match, but they kept us on the periphery quite a bit. I mean, you did see some pressing from Bowen and Kudus, but that was about it. I mean, in some of the wingbacks, and that's where all their mobility is, and even then they're not super mobile. I mean, the midfield had to drop ultimately. If you push him up, I think it creates all sorts of other problems.
I did find it interesting, I guess. It probably makes sense given the respective lineups, but Potter, typically a guy who favors more possession, but they seem totally content to let Everton have the majority of the ball, at least in the first half. That changed as the match went on, but as you said, Ryan, in order to do that, they just sort of sat a little deeper and kept us on the periphery, not really able to penetrate through their set defense.
Well, I think James also too, they're trying to get, as far into the game without conceding a goal, because I think that's been their biggest issue, right? So, and you kind of see it. Well, of course, we'll get to it in the second half how he turned it up. But yeah, of course, then you get to the 27th minute. Max Kilman, who had a great game today, driving forward with space, passes inside to Bowen. This was another moment where it's just like, why is Jared just kind of backing off of him? And that kind of was a precursor to what happened later. But turns and volleys.
Give him his left foot. What
Yeah.
are we doing, Sean?
Yeah, and it's a really good save from Pickford. Bowen just gets some really good movement on it, and kind of just after dominating, it feels like most of the half, you look up and they have two of the better chances for the game so far. But I will say this was a great moment in the 32nd minute. Jake O'Brien, he absolutely uncorks this, right? If there was a person in a citizen in the way just walking, it probably would have given them a concussion. And then, of course, some really good commentary in regards to this is just going to be a common theme all season, with all due respect. Two comments from Nick Weinstein: Deitch keeping O'Brien on the bench looks sillier and sillier each week. And then, of course, Sleazy, fair result. O'Brien has now surpassed Trent Alexander-Arnold as an offensive right back. So yeah, just criminal from Deitch that this guy was just not seeing the pitch.
And you appreciate what Moyes is trying to do, like even later in the match, pushing him up higher, playing the aerials to him as kind of that outlet. I mean, if you're going to use him, use him. I mean, so credit to David Moyes. You can see his adaptability. But it's hard for me to believe that this guy, and he's the same guy watched in France, is so talented that you couldn't get him on the pitch a little bit more. So fast forwarding to the end of the first half, penalty awarded here, folks. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, we're not going to get one here. And I don't know how you felt like at first. I didn't quite understand. I think Beto does very well here, by the way, to be patient, not lose his head, makes two very good little touches with it. It's hard to seal a guy off like that. And he's been getting kicked and shoved all match. He goes down, and we know Beto doesn't always flop down unless he really has to. And upon closer glance, he did not flop. He went down. What'd you guys think immediately? I thought there's no way this is going to possibly be a penalty. And upon replay, it asks a couple questions, I think, on replay.
Well, I think live, the initial thing is a great penalty. End of first half. Couldn't have been timed better. Lead going into the break. And then upon the very first replay, I said, there's no chance whatsoever that that's going to stand, because it's how many times are we going to have our guys just kick the ground in the box? It feels like it's crazy this season.
So I thought at first maybe he had his foot stepped on and it wasn't. But then when you see it on the backside, ultimately his foot clips the player on the back. I think it was Todibo. You see this a lot, though, and we were talking about this off the pod, but I'm curious what you guys think. If a player's winding up and you can get yourself in between the leg and the ball, is that a foul? It's probably not. You're entitled to that space, and you've not attacked their foot. But man, I've seen it called before. I'm not saying this should be a penalty. I think this is a pretty egregious example of one where Todibo's pretty innocent here on this play. He's entitled to that space, but if it happens to Mo Salah, does he get a call?
Yeah, he gets the call. And to James's point, I don't know if there are magnets in Goodison in regards to certain places, because to your point, James, it's just kind of incredible how many times our players can kick the ground. And it's everybody, right? Njai's done it, and so. But yeah, to your point, Ryan, I think this is kind of one of those things where it's happened enough this season where they're probably going to have to redefine that rule, because it's just like, it is a very gray area, and it is kind of a situation where, real time, you probably see that he's kind of in between two players. It is a shame, because Mavropanos is probably the guy that I would, make a mistake like that. So the fact that he didn't was pretty unfortunate. But yeah, just kind of, I give a lot of credit to the Discord and just a collective whole. I think everybody thought that it wasn't going to be a penalty, and they didn't spend 10 minutes like they usually do in VAR. It was a pretty quick turnaround, go to the monitor, and unfortunately we don't get the call.
But I think it also makes it hard to referee the sport anyway. I really feel like they can make some things a little more objective, a little less subjective in the rules, and maybe this is an example. I think the other one where the attacker creates the contact moving away from the ball at times, I think would be another nice addition, in addition to cleaning up some of the rules around the set pieces and stuff, because you had situations today where Jake O'Brien would be standing in front of a keeper, and he's 6'6", 180, 190 pounds at least. Very difficult to move, and I don't think anyone really wants to see that necessarily, and it just makes it would be, not that the PGMOL would ever do anything to make their members have an easier time of it, because it's probably the worst union and worst union leadership of any I know. And that's saying something, being a Western Pennsylvania guy. I just think that it would be nice. It's hard enough to officiate, right? And I thought we saw a lot of inconsistencies today. I wouldn't say it's unfair one way or the other, just some awful calls pretty consistently. It couldn't hurt.
Weird soft fouls one moment, and then the next moment blatant shoves going completely uncalled. It was just a very bizarre performance. But I also think those types of bang plays in the box where the defender puts their foot in, and then the attacker is really the one initiating the contact by kicking. Even in different contexts, you'll view that differently, but I don't think a defender trying to kind of shield the ball should really, and then an attacker kicks the crap out of them and knocks themselves over and flails. You don't want to reward that type of behavior generally.
Well, that's the other thing too. It would be so nice to be able to go back and retroactively give yellows. I think in some leagues you can, but that would be helpful, with some of the flopping and stuff. Heck, we could talk all day about what they could do to make the lives a little easier with the referees. We know they're not going to do it anyway, but the bottom line, he goes to the monitor, so you know what's going to happen. He reverses it, and I think it's fair, right? I don't think Beto did well here, but certainly not enough necessarily to earn the penalty, and we get to half, and I think the first half performance was fine. Really, their only chance from open play was Bowen's shot from distance, and that was one where backing off of him when he was totally isolated was, kind of almost giving them a gift of a chance. So I just think it was one of those halves where I thought maybe we're a little bit better team. I think if we'd have continued to play like that forever, I think I would have liked our chances of maybe getting something versus them. I think the second half started off a little differently, though. I thought West Ham got their feet a little little bit.
Yeah, I think it was a totally different dynamic coming out after the break. I mean, West Ham clearly ramped things up. They wanted to get on the ball a lot more, and it didn't take them very long. And furthermore, Everton went into our shell a little bit. We did not really have any success trying to get forward in the same ways that we did in the wide areas in the first half. I mean, but even so, even with West Ham kind of pressuring, they really didn't create a whole heck of a lot. In the 54th, there was that Souček through ball kind of from the top of the box, just splitting the defense, and Emerson's making the run in behind, who crosses it to Bowen. This is where he biked it into his own hand. A little bit ambitious on his part. Would not be the last bicycle attempt of the day that we would see. And then Ghana gets hurt and goes down, and no one plays it out. There's players starting to go down. There's a lot of contact. Again, I think this is where the referee starts to lose control of the game even a little bit more.
You know, I have some advice for anybody that is playing in the Premier League during Ramadan. You do not do these kind of egregious things towards Ghana, because you will pay, and you will see that later. And then like earlier, as you guys were talking about, I mean, Paqueta had 65 passes, but he had 10 screams today, just with the amount of just theatrics that were happening, and just another just embarrassment. I don't think, and I was saying this in the Discord, I don't think I've ever been more mad at a refereeing performance this season. And I do agree with Ryan in the sense of he was consistent, but he was consistently bad for both teams.
He just had no idea what he was going to call half the time. I mean, and the sequence, though, with Kudus knocking Mikolenko over, after, and we'll get to their goal here in a second, was just, to me, the most disgraceful one. He literally wipes him out twice. And we would have loved to have a set piece at that point, too. It just felt like he was not even reading the game. I mean, it was a little bit of an odd match, but he probably contributed to the choppiness.
And getting no help
the
from
ARs
his
were blind. Yeah, the linesmen were horrible. The linesmen just we're not looking at any. It was just like statues, just staring straight and just not calling anything. It was just, and like I said, both sides. I'm not just saying they had bias towards Everton. It was just very frustrating.
But the one thing I will say is West Ham did. I mean, not that they were on the front foot, but they came out in the second half with a little more purpose, a little more organization, and I just felt like we were very passive at times. And look, with our guys in the back, I mean, we should be at least stepping up and winning the ball. And I just think their goal here in the 67th was just bad defending and a little bit typical, I think, of what we were doing. And look, it's a great finish by Souček. It really is. And Bowen has the ball here, and he's a good dribbler. And I understand backing off a little bit and not wanting to foul in the box. But what is going on here? Tarkowski dropping off. I know he's good at blocking the shots, but at this point, Souček doesn't have options here. Just get on him. Maybe he thought Charlie had him there. I don't know what's going on here, too. Maybe they were a little upset. There was a shove in the buildup when we cleared the ball up where Beto almost got... I mean, Beto was getting murdered half the time. They never call anything. That's a little frustrating. I mean, look at the numbers on this one, too. XG of 0.05, post-shot XG of 0.86. He does very well here. I mean, Pickford is not going to save this from the proximity. Top spinner, too tough to get a hand on. It gets across the ground much quicker. I mean, I don't know what to say. I think this is when you look at Tarkowski and say you have to step forward here and make a defensive play. And I just, it's the type of one where this goal should not have been scored. I just felt like we should have pitched the shutout today. And I don't know. Very disappointing to me at this point to be down 1-0 after 68 minutes of this.
Incredibly on brand for it to be Thomas Souček, though, after all the links and everything. And after really had a couple moments earlier in the game, but he just shows up in the box and does something great that leads directly to a goal. And this is no doubt a really good finish. But Bowen, in the first place, he had received the ball in kind of the same spot just a few moments prior and had tried to sort of calibrate his dribble a little bit, taking guys on, and then he gets it immediately. So I guess some credit to West Ham for figuring out how to get him more involved, but you have to be prepared for that. And we were double teaming him, and he still splits the defenders with the pass. And you've got to mark the guys in the box. It's almost that simple.
And then we got out of sorts here. I mean, that terrible cleared header by Tark. I mean, Bowen's 1v1 versus JB, who's just a little step slow on him. Again, he's tough to deal with. Didn't get over to the left foot. Decent save by Pick. And West Ham corner. I don't understand how that was a corner. By the way, that was atrocious. And they end up getting two corners in essence afterwards. And it's a great delivery from Ward-Prowse to Souček on the back corner. Pickford does well to get in the right spot. But that 3 minutes right there gave West Ham 3 of their 4 shots on target. I mean, that was it. I mean, yes, it it was coming a little bit, I would say. I mean, they were growing into the match, but I mean, really, if you want to be specific, I mean, that was it. I mean, we have some stats halftime to the 68th and, 4 shots to 1, and possession was 60% for West Ham. They were getting on the ball a lot more, 6-0 in dribbles. I mean, the numbers don't look great. 2 corners, but it really all came, the culmination of it, and I guess that's football a little bit, came in about 3 or 4 minute span. Is this one where Moyes, I mean, I felt like the game was just getting out a little bit. Maybe a sub earlier would have been better. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think we were, and to kind of just say something about Souček, I didn't even know he was playing in the first half, right? And that's the kind of player he is. It's just he finds a way to make these plays. I mean, he scored the game winner, of course, at Goodison last season in this fixture, right? So, these players know that what he's capable of. And to your point, Ryan, it just felt like we just kind of just let off the gas and then almost had our heads down for that period, just feeling bad for ourselves. But I agree. I think the subs, Moyes kind of had at least a decent sample size of about a 10-15 minute period where he was, kind of seeing what was happening. And then, of course, we get our first sub, Lindstrom for Decore. And then it kind of looks like Jack moved left and Charlie to the middle. And then we start to maybe kind of get, something going in the 73rd, some good pressure, and then we get a corner. Jack, great cross, just no one in the middle. And then Jack actually, I think, takes this really well in the volley, gets a deflection, but, unfortunately, another corner and nothing really comes out of it.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say it looked incredibly promising that they were going to break through. I think there was still a problem with us, kind of getting into that final third and really getting open looks. And I'll tell you what, Moyes was not afraid to make a significant change here. You don't see too many triple subs. I think Dyche would have called it woke nonsense if I had to guess. But yeah, I mean, this is a big change. I'm curious all of your thoughts on this one. It certainly worked to some extent, so credit to Moyes. I mean, look, Moyes is a good manager. I mean, I'm pretty impressed with this change, but some guys that we hadn't seen for a while. So when we saw the bench at the beginning of the match, I don't know if we realized it would be quite this impactful, but this is about, I mean, if we had a triple sub all year?
Well, to be fair, I don't even know if there's 3 guys you could have reasonably put on at the same time on our bench for most of the season. But
Whoa. Michael Keane is there.
That's true.
You need a goal.
I did see some shouts saying throw Keno up top.
Thankfully, we got 4 center forwards. You got to do something with them, I guess. 5.
Yeah,
count Keane.
Moyes finally gets some resources at his disposal, and he wastes no time whatsoever in making the most of them. He brings on Chermiti, who's been on, has been on the bench for a few weeks. Finally gets his return to the team and some action. We get Broja straight back in, and Timur Bunum on for Beto, Jack, and Garner. And it results in a pretty dramatic shift in shape, or at least positioning for the attack. Broja used more in like a right winger kind of role, definitely drifting wide, and we saw the team trying to find him sort of down the channel. Chermiti up top, and then Tim, this is, if you're going to use someone like Timur Bunum, this is right where you want him, just sort of pushing for a goal, able to get on the ball, drive forward, cause a little bit of chaos.
I absolutely love these subs. Like, it's just, to me, like when you're chasing a game down 1-0, what do you have to lose, right? It's, last 5 games at Goodison, like, go for it, right? And I think for me, what was exciting, of course, as you said, James, right, Chermiti on the bench, right, we were kind of wondering on his health. Reports are saying he's fully healthy, so it was just like, when is he going to come on? And for Broja to come on, I think, kind of ahead of schedule is exciting, just to kind of use him in the final fixtures and whatnot. But yeah, it's just like, for us, it's like, go for it, right? Like, at this point, you have nothing to lose. I was impressed that Moyes was happy to kind of take the risk of putting those guys on. And this is no shot at Ashley Young, but it is exciting to have a triple sub and not have him be one of the subs in chasing the game.
Well, the one thing I do like is, I mean, the back 3, the ability to put 2 strikers in between those channels, you know what I mean, that they would open up potentially between the backers, just forces them to sit back deeper, be more compact. And yeah, we saw Broja like stepping out wide a little bit, and I mean, he looked a little sluggish, I think. His decision-making wasn't necessarily that quick. But it's hard to argue. I mean, look, for the rest of the way, it was 4-0 in shots, 76% possession, 3 corners to 0. And yes, they packed it in, but they also packed it in because we threw numbers forward, and we contained them and kept them in for a while. Kudos to Paqueta for, in maybe his last match, picking up a yellow in the 81st. I'm sure that made lots of money for his family on the betting circuit, so nice work on that one, too. Finally, he subbed off for Soler. I'm sure that was in case they had big money on the red card, obviously, because the odds are greater on that one. Can we talk about the ridiculous. Well, we had a big corner here. Trimidi had a shot blocked, and he looked lively. Trimidi was definitely... that's the thing, man. The guy is 6'4", and his feet are so light. He's so active. I mean, you could see him maybe being a player eventually, but in the 85th minute, he showed his ferocity and his tendency for violence, where he got a vicious yellow card for tapping Soler maybe on the head with his mittens. This, to me, was... I'm sorry. It was utterly ridiculous. I mean, he gets a yellow for this? This is the first time he's made contact with anyone. He's chasing him up the flank, barely touches him. I mean, Soler was down again. He was shot, poked in the eye, stabbed perhaps. I don't know. It's just a nonsense call. It's just the unpredictability of the calls, I think, just was driving us crazy. And this one, to me, is about almost as egregious as Kudus wiping out Mikolenko twice.
Yeah, the fact that it's his first significant really tackle or really engagement with another player, and he does kind of they're just sort of slap fighting, both running for the same ball, trying to win it. It felt like kind of nothing to 0 to 100 to get a yellow for that. Just totally out of nowhere and kind of bizarre. But Trimidi was definitely up for it.
And Ward-Prowse literally took out one of our guys on a total professional foul. There was no yellow for that too. So I was like, what is going on here? I will say this. I had a feeling, and I told everyone at the pub this too. I was like, we're gonna equalize here. I like how we look. I just felt like you've got some guys out there with some better delivery. And if you're going to allow time on space on the ball with guys like Lindstrom and guys that can move the ball and a little bit crisp on it, I felt like we'd have a chance. But let me tell you what, this sequence for the goal is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Ryan, I think it's one of our favorite sequences of the season just because, you look at it. So crazy play, of course. Yusuf gets an incredible volley on goal. This is an excellent save by Areola, and I was just kind of even just so proud of that in real time. And then, of course, the deflection kind of goes to Charlie. This is a really good cross by Charlie, by the way, because he kind of is leading Ghana to a place where he can get a touch on it. And I just want to say, and I think you guys will say it, this touch by Ghana is incredibly difficult to do real time, and especially kind of, momentum shifting that one way. Gets an incredible ball in the box to Jake O'Brien, who puts it right on his head. Great header away from space. And it's 1-1, and it just, Goodison is rocking. I think everybody's excited just because at the end of the day, I think we were, really knocking on the door. And for us to get that, I think, especially with a few minutes to go in stoppage time, very big.
Love the mentality, it's just like we had it, you just felt like it was coming a little bit, and the team seemed like it was confident that it was coming too. It's hard to gauge those things, obviously, sitting in a pub, thousands of miles away, but still you just felt it, I mean, and that's encouraging, right? I haven't felt that way, even knowing we're missing some guys in a long time.
I'll say something similar. I mean, there's been so many matches in recent years where we've been down a goal in the last 10, 15 minutes, and there's just no hope whatsoever that we would even get a shot on target, much less score. And that, under Moyes, has just completely reversed. And the squad is playing, and they're pushing with intent, with belief, I won't say the S word, but there's real intensity about pushing for that equalizer or even winners. And of course, the cross from Charlie, reading it, he showed some phenomenal vision on long balls today in this ball as well. The touch from Ghana and he's so open. To see that space, to run into it, and to find the pass at the same time, everything coming together perfectly. And then you've got Jake O'Brien, a monster in the box, just waiting for someone to get the ball to his head.
Quality on every one of these plays, from the Trimidi strike, hit just beautifully. Charlie, beautiful. Ghana, perfect. O'Brien, the header is no joke. I mean, okay, it's a big chance, but he buries it. I mean, literally you had 4 touches that were legitimately perfect. I mean, you could not do much better. And it's just, it's the beautiful game. We just haven't seen it that way in so long because we've been too busy putting in the hard yards. Anyway, couple funny comments here from the pub. DC Toffee mentioned to me hey, Ryan, that's a legit assist, right? That one counts. Thought that was fair. Fair shot there.
If only they were all like that.
Yeah, Sludvig had a couple chuckles at that one as well at me. At Tana Robertson from Twitter, that ball from Ghana is just silly. And yeah, I agree, it was. I mean, that's the one, though, on it, the dagger ball. We're talking about assists. That is so hard to do. And I mean, yeah, Jake's a big target, but man, it was absolutely perfect. Just perfect. And for a guy that runs around normally, just run around like a maniac, winning tackles all over the place, sometimes you do forget, especially with some of his crazy shots from deep, how skilled he can be with the ball. I mean, he's just a fabulous player.
Well, that's what I was going to say is we didn't get our customary Ghana launch shot. Instead, we get this. I'll trade that any day. He can do that instead every single game. I'm not going to have any complaints.
And just a quick shout out to Ghana. I mean, for him to be doing this in the 91st minute while he's celebrating Ramadan and just kind of fasting is just insane. So
his run of games during Ramadan is truly mind-boggling.
This guy,
it's crazy.
At 35, just insane. And we will continue to repeat it just because he deserves all of his flowers for that. But then, Ryan, I think the moment of the match by far.
I was really concerned here.
Evan Ferguson comes on. I think Armando Broja has had more minutes than Evan Ferguson has had in a West Ham shirt. I say that jokingly, but we might, if we look at the tape, we might be right. It's funny. I wanted to say this in that sequence. I think as much as Moyes started to manage this game well after that goal, I think Potter got it all wrong. I think for whatever reason, they just kind of went away from, kind of controlling the ball, I think being a bit more aggressive, and then they just soaked up pressure, which I think they didn't really need to do, and I think also too, it just kind of led to this Evan Ferguson moment, and then I think the moment of the match after that, right, the 94th minute, I thought this was 2-1. Tark heads it forward. It goes through Mavropanos. This is also really good by Tremidi, by the way, getting that kind of flick on. And then Charlie's right there. This is the guy, we talk about how, we want like this guy and that guy in the moment. That's who we want there. And he just hits it wide. It curls around the post. Great chance to win. And unfortunately, we don't see it go through.
Yeah, it doesn't quite hit it perfect, but obviously not an easy keeper to beat. I agree with you on Potter here. I feel like you have a whole bench here. You've got some players out there. God, you couldn't have made a change whatsoever. The only midfielder you've subbed out is Paqueta. Like, what use is Ward-Prowse at this point? Souček's a big guy, get it, defending set pieces, maybe in the air, but, boy, it just goes to show you from a recruitment standpoint. You don't bring on really a proper striker. You have Ings on the bench, in theory. Another absurd transfer. Oh, my God. Edson Alvarez is sitting there, like no move there whatsoever. You have a young attacking player, too, that you really haven't used. So I just don't know what's going on. So I don't know. Is it better to have a bench and not use it, or have a minimal bench and use it a bit? Either way, I don't know. Looking back on it, guys, looking at the numbers for sure and just kind of having a feel for the match, maybe a deserved result. We certainly didn't deserve anything less than a point, I think. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I think no doubt in my mind about that. Especially with the way we responded to the goal. I truly thought after we equalized that we would go on to win. And I'm totally happy with a point given the order of the goals scored, but 0.47 XG for Everton to 0.35 for West Ham in the second half. So clearly nothing crazy, no crazy chances, but making the most of them. 6 shots to 5. But again, we talked about it, all their shots came in just a short few minute span when they eventually scored. Pickford with a couple saves. We had 5 corners to their 2, and possession ended up relatively even despite West Ham starting out the first, I guess you'd say the third quarter of the game. They dominated possession, but then we just dominated it for the remainder.
They took a chance really well. Really, on a defensive play where we sat back too much on it, too. James, you made a good point. When we equalized, I was thinking we could still go on and win. Like, I hadn't felt that way in a while. I even thought I yelled something at the bar, like, get it out in the net, score another one, and some West Ham fan in the background made some comment. I was going to attempt to walk over there and ask him what he meant, but that's what happens when you're with your family. I don't think they would have been too receptive to that, but I did feel that way. And really, that's when you look back at it, that's what it was. And I think we were better in most areas. So the one thing I did not like, though, just kind of looking at the numbers, is I do feel like we're a little passive. I felt like in kind of winning battles. So just kind of looking at, I looked at the second half duel stats, and they're not great. 62% of ground duels won by West Ham. Even won a few more aerials as well. They won 37 duels to our 27. So I don't, and they had the ball a lot, especially in the beginning of it. But I'll say this, as a game in a totality, I think what happened was you had Beto very isolated, and you made it probably a little bit easier for Kilman and Todibo. But they did well. Max Kilman, 8 for 8 in duels won, no fouls, which, okay. Todibo, 8 for 12 in duels won as well with no fouls. So it's kind of like, and then to me, the tail of the match statistically was, Everton had 28 touches in the box. West Ham only had 24, but Everton had 243 passes in the opposition half versus 156 for West Ham and 54% of the ball. Like, to me, that says a bit, lots of headed shots, lots of stuff kind of pushed out to the periphery. Question. If you have Decore in there instead of Charlie, say you put Lindstrom on instead and put Dukes to the bench, is this the same match? I mean, it seems to me what we were missing is maybe a little bit of a presence there at kind of the top of the 18 that really kind of attack them, because you'd think you'd have time and space on the ball down the middle with their midfield, and I just felt like we didn't.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Ryan, in terms of the duels, I think it was just a tough matchup because you look at Kilman and Todibo. Like, I just think, this is kind of the second straight match where Beto's kind of faced a really good, center back in terms of Agbadou last week. And then you kind of see Kilman and Todibo. I think they just are good players, right? So, and then also, on the opposite end, right, in regards to us backing away, right, to Bowen and Kudus, right, I think the only players that were really competing were like the midfield in terms of Ghana trying to help out on Kudus as much as he could. I think that was just kind of unfortunately a bit of a matchup issue. But yeah, it's just, to me, it was a bit concerning in regards to the Dukes versus Charlie situation. I also thought there were plenty of times in the second half versus the first half that we were just being way too, I think, methodical in trying to get the perfect ball in the box and then just ultimately just putting it back, right? Which ultimately is just going to lead us to, much of what was going to happen where we ended up losing the ball, right? Jack had a few bad touches, I remember, right, and trying to get the ball forward and just kind of kicked it right into the defender. So we just had a lot of those moments, I feel like, in the second half versus first half. I think we were just making decisions a lot faster.
But I also think in some ways, West Ham, I don't know if we imposed this on ourselves or West Ham imposed this on us, but made us play a game that we don't really have the squad to play or the comfort with the ball at our feet. Like, there was not a lot of direct counterattacking play on our end. They got into it a little bit when they were able to find Kudus in space or Bowen in space and really drive the ball forward, but we didn't really have the same opportunities.
I think that's true. I mean, they only pressured their top guys and kind of dropped other people back for the most part. So that took away those transition moments. That being said, some of the indecisiveness we had in the final third, I think, was problematic. I would have liked to see us push, that second striker, 10, whatever you want to call him, up a little bit farther. And I think in this instance, some better delivery from distance, maybe attacking them from the air would have been the right thing to do. It's hard to do it against three guys, but and getting on second balls and just moving the line up a little bit more. I mean, I think that probably would have been the solution, but I think you saw some indecisiveness there. And James, maybe to your point, it's unfamiliarity with the way to attack. And maybe you get a little of this about Charlie playing wide as well. I don't know. I mean, but it certainly wasn't fluid. I mean, when we made the subs and we had a very distinct purpose, and it's easier to play like that too when you're not really worrying about necessarily what's behind you. But I think if there was a critique of the match that could be done is maybe Moyes got a little bit too conservative in terms of defending and having the shape rather than going at them.
Yeah, I think we didn't see the same aggression of first half. Definitely notably clear we were trying to get the ball in the box quite a bit. And then I think we went away from that at the start of the second half, trying, to Sean's point, try to find that perfect opportunity to get it in rather than just put it in the mixer and utilize, Beto trying to create space.
Yeah, I don't know if we have the best personnel to get it into the mixer like that, though, to your point. I mean, it's just not, I mean, when you bring in someone like Lindstrom, yeah, maybe you got some a little more service, or Jack, that's okay. But, I mean, I don't think anyone's, no offense to Mikalenko, is going to expect him to start. I mean, he's not the worst crosser in the world, but he's certainly not the best. And I mean, Jake O'Brien,
a lot of both of our fullbacks to really contribute offensively.
Well, I think that's why it's so easy to look at this team and think, boy, what would it be if we had different types of personnel, and hopefully we'll get to see that in the summer. Regardless, there were some good performances, no doubt. For me, JB was really good, I think. Maybe not spectacular at times. He almost knocked it in his own net. That probably wasn't his best moment. But look, the guy had 10 clearances. No one on Everton had more than 4, 8 recoveries. I mean, he was, if anyone, a guy that was a little bit more aggressive, 4 for 7 on long balls. And he led Everton with 76 touches, 9 passes into the final third. Only Mikalenko had more at 10. I just felt like of all the guys kind of back there, knowing we didn't give up too many chances and he had nothing to do with the goal, really, I thought he was probably a bit of a bright spot.
Yeah, and for me, I was actually very tempted just in the moment to put Tremidi as man of the match just because I loved like the chaos that he was creating. But I actually chose Ghana. 1 key pass, of course, 1 aerial one, Ryan's favorite stat, 1 assist, 4 tackles, 2 interceptions, 1 clearance, 1 block shot. 94% pass accuracy, over 50 passes. But the reason I chose him is I just felt like he was just so integral to almost everything in the game, right? Like I felt like once again, he was everywhere in terms of some of the passing sequences in the midfield. I think he did a really good job on Mo Kudus in terms of slowing him down and trying to help some of the defense when, he was on the attack. So I thought he played a masterful game today. And I thought he was really important because I don't think if he wasn't there today, I think they would have had a lot more control of the match.
It's funny, you look at between Garner and Ghana, and they barely missed a pass all match, but, Ghana had the big impact, if anyone. Obviously, the assist, yes, but, he had 9 passes in the final third. Garner had 3. So just as a combination, 94% passing. Garner was 51 of 52 in passes, according to Opta. And that's great and fine, but to do what? You know what I mean? And so that's what's a little problematic. And again, it's just a 2-man midfield, so I get it. You can't necessarily count on them to be necessarily the creative force. But then you look at Decore, and Decore created some stuff today, maybe not enough. It just feels like they could have been a little bit more dominant. We could have gotten a little bit more down the middle, and we just didn't. But I don't think it was for lack of Ghana. He was everywhere.
100%. I think on Branthwaite, just wanted to give a special mention to the moment where I was so certain that Wan-Bissaka had him beat around the corner, kind of had turned him, and then he made a really good recovery and totally stuffed the play. That was spectacular. Ghana, if we go back through all of our episodes, I think he's probably been in the good performances in about 85 to 90% of them. For me, he's like head and shoulders above anyone else for player of the season this year. So incredible. But on the day, had to go with the guy who scored the winner. It's Jake O'Brien. The goal was excellent. He had 3 key passes. That shot, he had 2 shots, both on target. The first shot was absolutely ripped. Then he scored the goal. 9 passes into the final third as well. So I think we picked all 3. There were 3 guys who had 9. I think we picked all 3 of them. In 3 recoveries. On the defensive end, honestly, not his best performance. I think he was like 1 for 5 in duels. So what I really wanted to emphasize was I think he did such an admirable job getting forward more, and he continues to look more and more comfortable as the weeks go by and overlapping, finding the right positions, and he whipped in a couple decent crosses today as well. Still not a strong suit of his game, nor would you expect it to be, but just really impressed with how he's adapted to that right back position, and he scored 2 goals in 3 matches that have earned us 2 points. So credit to the kid, and glad that he's finally getting some run time.
This is kind of, I think when we look back, maybe next year and whether he's playing kind of a traditional center back role, I think this kind of spell in his Everton career is going to be very good for him, because I feel like he's had to kind of do things, non-traditionally in terms of these diagonal balls, and you're seeing the progression, right? Like he's getting better like at these things. And so, credit to Jake, right? I think consummate professional in his time at Everton, but I think he's really taken the opportunity, and he's never complained once about being out of position. I think he's done a great job.
And Moyes talked a little bit, in the presser about him playing as a more traditional center back, and that's probably his future. But you could also see him playing in a 3, much like he did in France as well. He's shown he can carry the ball, and he's shown some more offensive aptitude than anyone should expect of someone at that size. The sad part is, as a scout, when you see a guy like this that can move like this, that has these skills, you're thinking 100 million pound player. I just cannot believe that Dyche would have seen this guy and felt like he couldn't do anything with him. But I'm sure he just wasn't doing anything in practice, I'm sure, in training. Yeah, sure. Anyway, going forward, though, look, it's performances like this in certain instances. You see a guy like Trimidi jump off the bench and some other guys that make you think that maybe there's some other elements in here, too. Because if you think of the sequence of the goal, you had Ghana, but you had 3 guys who weren't seeing the pitch. One guy wasn't even here, and one guy wasn't really healthy under Dyche. I think that's tremendous. It's at least somewhat encouraging. So I'm going to go to Jackson Bugle, friend of the pod, longtime listener. And I think he brings up an interesting point in a conversation piece in terms of going forward. Maybe something to discuss, but now that Trimidi and Broja are back, what should our starting forwards be with new options? Beto, Alcaraz, Dukes Lindstrom, Harrison, Trimidi, Broja, potentially McNeil, and Njai if they come back soon. I'm not going to say that's a plethora of riches necessarily, but it is a lot of different combination of players that you might be able to get a tune out of. The thing for me is Njai starts no matter what. To me, he's the one locked on guy, and I think if he plays today, it's just such a difference maker. And I'm fine with him playing off the left, to be perfectly frank. In a Moyes setup, in the Dyche setup, I hated it. He should have been the second striker. Curious your thoughts about the rest of the guys.
I'll just say that you say that's not an impressive list. I feel like Scrooge McDuck swan diving into the pile of gold with that list of names compared to what we've had for attacking options this year. Yeah, it's not maybe great relative to the rest of the league, but compared to what we've been working with, definitely gives some interesting options. But I also, I don't really see Moyes starting Broja over Beto. I don't think he's really a great fit for. He can get in behind, and maybe in games, maybe honestly in April where we're going to be looking to transition a little bit more, that's an interesting option. But I don't see Broja working his way back to fitness, unseating, or Trimidi for that matter. I still don't think Trimidi's quite ready. I do think all of those names are interesting ones as substitutes off the bench to change a game, to change the dynamics of the attack if we feel it's warranted. And especially looking at the games ahead, which we'll get to in a second, but it's a brutal April. I do kind of see Doucouré having a lockdown spot in that second striker 10 role because we're going to be off the ball so much, and clearly Dyche values his work rate. So maybe tweaks here or there, but I honestly don't see any kind of radical changes. Of course, if Njai comes back, immediately probably first name on the team sheet. But other than that, I think you can kind of afford to kind of ease guys in, give them some cameos. And then if they perform really well, maybe they unseat someone like Lindstrom today. I mean, I think it was a fair decision to move Lindstrom to the bench. He'd been decent. He'd been okay, but had been, I think, not maybe at his best, and maybe moving him to the bench and giving him a substitute appearance gives him a bit of a different look at a match and a different opportunity to perform with fresh legs. So I kind of just like the minute tweaks and rotation that Moyes is approaching it with. And I think you kind of have a formula. We're 9 unbeaten now that's been working, and I don't expect anything to change too radically.
I think if you want an identity of a team, I think it's safe to say Beto's going to play, or at least going to start. I think it'd be a little bit surprising to see him leave the lineup for any reason. And although he's had some tough matchups the last 2 weeks, I think he had moments today, too, where he was very isolated, but still somewhat effective. And some of his touches were very good, too. So if you assume and know him, the type of player he is, and knowing we're going to be playing some tough guys, he loves to run outside, he loves to run in behind. To me, you probably want some guys to surround him with that can take it, run a little bit, and maybe play him through. I don't know if Doucouré's really that guy anymore, but maybe he just is in short spurts. And also he's fasting and stuff too. It can't be that easy for any of these guys, and especially not him, which is just funny because you look at Ghana as being older and he's just so, it almost doesn't matter. But I mean, I like the idea of Alcaraz running with the ball a little bit. I love the idea of Njai taking off with the ball and trying to play Beto through. I felt like they had a little bit of chemistry. I mean, Lindstrom has pace and everything and has shown the defensive work rate. I have no idea how Dwight McNeil fits in this team, by the way. I just don't. I mean, I'd love to see a set-piece delivery out there, but I don't mean other than a kind of a wing-back option when you sub on late, or, I mean, can he play right wing and cut inside? I mean, he doesn't have to. If you think about it, well, I'll say this. James is shaking his head no, and he's probably right. But I'll say this. My concern about him being so, left foot oriented is that he couldn't really make a do with an overlapping wingback anyway. But if you've got Jake back there who's not necessarily going to push up higher, doesn't have to, well, maybe that orientation is okay. I mean, I kind of like the idea of him getting the ball on his left foot, cutting inside a little bit, looking for right footer like Charlie, like Njai, or playing Beto through. I mean, I wouldn't rule that out, even if he's not the most pacey guy in the world. Just a thought. I mean, my guess is he's not going to be ready to come right back and play 90 minutes anyway.
Well, also, too, I think one thing we look at is minutes management, right? In terms of April 2nd and April 5th, playing Liverpool and Arsenal within a 3-day time frame, you could see minutes for these guys. I think Beto is the key to me in regards to getting his minutes down, right? Similar to how we talked about Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I think if Beto knows he's going to be playing 60 minutes instead of 90 minutes, I think you're going to get a better player, right? You see him tail off at the end of games. It's tough, right? And so for me, like, that is, I think, what I'm really excited about, just because I agree with you, Ryan. I don't think that, like, these guys are ready for starting, but, like, I think Charlie has kind of, if Charlie really is in the club's future, which I think he is, like, I think you got to start him at this point, because he's just, I think, given so much creativity to Everton. I think he's done really well in today, kind of helping out in the defensive end. I love the Charlie Beto chemistry. I don't love the Beto Charlie chemistry in regards to Beto needs to get his head up and give that guy a pass for once. I love you, Beto, but please, you got to do Beto. And so for me, like, that is really the kind of the thing to look at. I also think, too, for Dwight, maybe putting him on as a sub for Mykolenko later in games to kind kind of test that out in regards to a wing back and getting better quality in the box, right? So it's exciting because I feel like it gives us options that we didn't have before. And I think from a rotational standpoint, I do wonder if the club is going to try to prioritize the guys that are on contract versus, loans, right, in regards to going later in the season and making key decisions on guys. So it's just an exciting time. I think it's, of course, a brutal April, but if you look at also games that we're going to have to chase the game, we finally have a bench that will be able to do so.
Well said. Well said. I think that was interesting. It's nice to have options, without a doubt. We got a couple more comments here before we wrap up, starting with Mike from the Discord. Quote, all these draws don't look as bad if you just add some goals, attributed to David Moyes' problem. And yeah, I mean, that Deitch quote is going to live long.
I know.
In the meme sphere.
And it's deserved, but I don't think, like, you could say maybe Moyes is a little bit conservative today, but I really don't think it's necessarily a super defensive setup necessarily. He's just missing some individual quality. I think that would make a little bit difference. I mean, he's not holding these guys back or anything. I mean, you could argue and say, well, putting Decore in there and not one of the three other guys is somewhat limiting, but, it's fine. I mean, it's a debate, it's a debate either way. So I think that's the nice part about it. But yeah, I mean, Sledvig said something similar at the bar too, which is kind of funny. Yeah, but I mean, look, you can't deny. I mean, it's 9 unbeaten. So I think Ralph hits it pretty well here.
Yeah. Ralph Marlborough at Saints Forecast. I hope he's not a Southampton fan. Watching Everton under Moyes is delightful.
New Orleans.
That's right. They fight, and 9 unbeaten with this injured roster is ridiculous. I'll worry about the summer. Going to enjoy the rest of the Goodison games. Boy, I was wrong about Moyes. And yeah, I think as you kind of mentioned, Ryan, like this team, we said it, like we're going to struggle without Iliman and Jai, right? And I think we're kind of seeing that, right? And of course, Charlie, the integration, right, has been kind of a little bit of a slow burn and him getting a lot of time on the pitch, and good for Moyes for kind of giving him his, I think, deserved start at this point. And that's why I think we're kind of crying out for when he is back healthy. And of course, we hope he's not rushed, just because there's a long future for him here, is to see both of them together, because I think he's gonna, love playing with Charlie's gonna love playing with Iliman, because he's gonna, he's probably the only player on the pitch that is kind of gonna match his creativity and ability to kind of move and just kind of have that eye for finding the right positions. And then, really going into kind of the April cauldron, it is tough. I think, James, you mentioned it. Playing the top 5 teams, I believe, in that specific order, if you look in the Premier League table. And yeah, it was just, on a side note, it was really hilarious. I mean, the Premier League's reaching at straws. The pre-match presser was, will Chelsea be able to catch Arsenal in the second spot? And it's just like, who cares? Yeah, going into the match at Liverpool. So basically another Merseyside derby at Anfield. At home versus Arsenal 3 days later, and then of course the Toffee Fest game at Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say though is, I mean, it's been incredibly encouraging how more dynamic Moyes has been with these guys and putting these pieces together. And you could say, well, I mean, couldn't have done worse than Dyche did at the beginning of the year. Well, okay, but I mean, the results have been maybe a little bit fortunate, but I mean, even today, I mean, could have won this match for sure. So I've been impressed. I mean, I was very concerned. I thought it would be a lot of the same, but I think fundamentally, Moyes' problem at West Ham that we saw, a very dull team, a very uninventive one, really wasn't that at all. Later, I'm saying as his team got aged, it was more the personnel, I think, rather than him. He's a little bit more dynamic than maybe I thought. So I'll take back some of those sentiments. Still concerned about the transfer committee and all that stuff, but that's a conversation for another day. To Ralph's point, I'll worry about the summer in the summer.
Yeah, and I mean, this is our last match for the month of March. We don't play again. I think April 3rd is the derby, so we've got a few weeks off. International break, of course. Jared Branthwaite will be not on England duty, controversially, and I think incorrectly, but we'll be thankful that he's not going to pick up any needless injuries. And with the international break, we do plan to finally get the opportunity to take a beat and do some different types of episodes covering there were even more announcements this morning, the dramatic leadership changes at Everton, covering that, Kinnear, all that stuff, the new football structure. We really want to dig into that and provide you guys with some analysis on that front. So stay tuned. Looking forward to that. Otherwise, I think that probably puts a bow on this episode. 9 unbeaten, pretty hard to complain. Pretty content with that result. So with that, we'll leave you there. Until next time, up the Toffees.